well, Office US, Office Us, is a project. It's not an exhibition, and what this project proposes is a new model for an office, an architectural office that is going to practice globally, but also from local desires. The idea here is that we need to rethink the ways in which we produce architecture if we are to look at what has happened over the last 100 years, where a large body of architectural production has been not examined, nor investigated, and to try to find new terms and new ways in which we can explore and understand not only those particular things that we like about architecture, but also those things that we don't like. So this office starts with an archive, with a library that is an archaeological excavation of the last 100 years of US firms production abroad, meaning in a global scale. So this library is a transversal object of inquiry that allows us to understand two things. First, how the office, as the essential part of the production of architecture, allows for the understanding of different values, from ethical models to business models to production models, to produce an architecture that is not just happening immediately in the same cultural, physical context, but elsewhere, and what kind of intelligence an office needs to have in order to produce that leap, and what cultural differences and exchanges occur in that process, and what value can we actually generate out of that. So the other aspect of this archive obviously is these projects, and how each one of these projects is able to tell us stories about individuals and forces that we are not always aware of in the construction process, from the ones who build the buildings to the ones who commission the buildings to the ones that write the codes and the rules and the laws of those buildings. So each one of these repository books in this library, this archive, is a history of the reception of those buildings as well, historically. So we take media very important, and how things have historically registered in that regard. But the project ultimately wants to do is to bring together the entire architecture field, the ones that are big and the ones that are small, the ones that produce architecture in a larger scale versus the ones that produce architecture in a singular scale, the ones that do it fast and slow, to understand what we can learn from each other and produce a new space of collectivity where we can all come together to share some of those aspirations that we might not be able to practice in our current conditions. So this office has people inside universities, inside governments, inside offices, and the idea is to come together to rethink for 6 months 25 issues, 25 questions that for us are important, that have endured historically, and that are still present today, and that you can find them with the black folders in this repository. Because an exhibition is a device, right, or a model that tries to communicate a particular message. Right? A project is something that develops, that has a mission, and yet not in every single moment in time one might be able to conceive and perceive the totality of it. So in this case here, one is only able to perceive fragments of what is going to be happening. This is just really the beginning of Office US. Office Us became Office US became Office Us when we opened, right? So as the representatives of the US, suddenly here we become the representative of us, and this is for us extremely important. The project hopefully is going to have many transformations, and I think what is important for us to understand is that the Biennale has really offered the opportunity for this project to exist, meaning the fact that people are going to come and sit down at this table and the outside table that for us becomes the pavilion exterior side, but the Biennale meeting table is very important. And to really think that today, when the consumption of information can happen so easily through all digital and technological means, the fact of bringing people together, the bodies, and the transmission of ideas through conversation becomes even more relevant. So over the next 25 weeks, there's going to be lectures every Friday and workshops every Saturday. And so that is not an exhibition, it's a project that tries to take architecture and these questions as the clients. And we also like to call it an experiment, mostly because we don't necessarily know what is that is going to come out of it, yet we have a set of constraints that might allow us to measure and oversee what is that really this project can produce after 6 months and see if actually it can live after it. I always say there are no bad questions, there are only stupid answers. So he could have asked anything, right? And I think the challenge of being the curator of the Biennale is to really try to ask something that is relevant for several people, and that several people can understand the same thing, right? And I think that's the difficult part. So previous teams were really dwelling on that, right? Common ground, people being together. In this case, modernity is something that everyone could understand, and also this idea of fundamentals or elements is something that culturally can also change, but discursively he said it very clearly. For us, a fundamental aspect is the office, right? And a fundamental aspect is the office manual and the protocols that regulate the relationships between people. And so I think the conversation is a good one as long as the interlocutors are good. And I think they have been incredible propositions by many of the national pavilions that have really made the question worthy. So it's not so much about who asks the question or what the question is, it's about who answers it. And I think they have been incredible answers. I'm going to be here for a long time, coming and going. We are going to be teaching at the UAP at the University of Venice, so I have really reserved my energies to visit the pavilions, not with all the crowds, but with time and different temporality than the one that the opening week provides. So I have seen some. I have seen actually the one that just got the Golden Lion, and Min Suk Cho is a very good friend, and Storefront actually has a project there that Kyong Park he did back in the earlier years of Storefront for art and architecture, the DMZ project. And so what I think is fascinating about that exhibition is that it really takes the building in and of itself, and it allows the building to be, right? And so, and the telling of the stories that's the medium that those stories can be told, right? So it is not about the representation of something; it's just knowing that what the project constructs can only be told through those narratives and through those mediums and through those spaces. So I think there are sometimes projects that even this is the conversation. Always about architecture and display. Sometimes you have architecture that is talking about architecture. Sometimes you have buildings that are able to talk about architecture. Sometimes you have drawings that talk about architecture, and sometimes you have drawings that are architecture, right? So this is still something that it is in the conversation table, but everyone is very conscious about it, and I think everyone is moving away from it. So I think we will have to find a new conversation soon that will have to do with how performative and how interesting are not just like the mediums, but the ideas that we are creating, and how much impact we have beyond the moment, the temporality and the duration of those exhibitions and those projects and those ideas. And I think that's the idea of the consequences and the residue of what one does and the effort that one produces, the idea of investment and return. I think it is important, not in a just framework of like 3 days opening or like 6 months, but really understanding much more historically what is the contribution that we are making by putting so many people and energy together to come here and to have a conversation. And I think this is for me the space that provides me with most joy about this project, is that I do believe that we are making a good contribution to the field that might resonate within architecture offices or educational institutions or governments. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not in 6 months, but in a larger, longer time span. Because I think it's important to really find new forms of practice. And so, in that regard, we are producing these 4 books. The first one is already out, that is this agenda. The second one is going to be an atlas together with a compilation of all these projects, but also of readings, of texts that have been able to contribute to this understanding of the history of the architectural office and the ability of building in a global scale. And the third book is really going to bring into the idea of the office the manual. And it is a compilation of historical quotes from manuals from the last 100 years, almost a kind of exquisite cadaver of manuals. Yet at the same time, we are asking contemporary individuals to contribute to that, to reflect on it, maybe in the same way that Thomas More he did with Utopia, right, in 1509. And the third part of this book is the Office Us manual. What are the principles by which we can start understanding how we want to live together, how do we want to work together, and the idea that, for instance, procrastination, that is something very American, is something very productive in other cultures, where we call it siesta, or we call it inspirational time, right? So the idea is to try to find new ways of measuring so that we can all make just better architecture ultimately, and change some of those things that have made the architect less of a relevant figure and more of a just element in the production chain of ideas. And I think all the different projects that have been rewarded today as great contributions to the field are very much projects that are able to do that. Architecture is probably the only place where all the different forces of society come to build the civic life of that society. So for me, an architect has the privilege and the responsibility to articulate the collective aspirations of its time. And for that, architecture needs to be able to understand the society that constitutes it, that is part of it. So I like to think that ultimately architecture is just simply the materialization of forces, and sometimes the transformation of those forces that one wants to change. And for that, the architect always needs to be many things at the same time, not only an architect, but a sociologist, an anthropologist, priest, and to be able to collaborate with many people outside of the field that are able to understand critically the social and political constructs that we have inherited, and the ones that are oppressing us, and the ones that we should change and transform. And architecture is probably the most powerful of the tools that society has to really bring people together, and at the same time to divide them, and to produce moments of collectivity that ultimately is what constructs social and civic life. In the next 2 days we are going to start these conversations that we are going to have in the next 25 weeks here at the Venice Biennale. I invite anyone who wants to participate, who wants to be part of Office Us, to go into our website, officeus.org, and to contribute by either sending a project, either by sending us some ideas, or just simply participating in our blog and send us some of your thoughts about how the world of architecture can contribute to the world of ideas. Over these 25 weeks we are going to be streaming some of the lectures that are going to be happening every Friday and the workshops on Saturday, and through export and import, Trojan horses, code upgrades, the invisibles, or some of the images that we have here behind talking about labor league or questions of doing good. We would like to have as many people as possible part of this conversation that is starting here in Venice and that we hope is going to continue even after the 6 months of Office Us, working globally as part of a project that tries to understand local desires through the collectivity of many architects. So if you would want to be part of Office Us and want to be Office Outpost, please also just send us an application, and the partners are going to make sure that we bring the best into this table.